When the intern stood there speechless and clearly unable to answer, the patient turned away in disappointment and said he had not even read basic popular science books about space. Because of that, he refused to accept such a talentless person as his student. The director quickly stepped in and told the embarrassed intern to follow him. For the next month, his task would be to take care of this patient and somehow convince him to accept him as a student. He then handed over another set of notes detailing the patient's specific habits, personality, and care requirements. At that moment, Jasper and Levi finally arrived at the training area. Jasper looked surprised when he saw that people now had to line up just to speak with the director. Seeing the line, the two of them casually decided that they might as well take a place and wait like everyone else. Soon it was the turn of one of the female interns. The director smiled politely as he prepared to introduce her to her assigned patient. Just then, Jasper stepped forward and cheerfully greeted the director from behind. The moment Sean heard that familiar voice, his face turned pale with shock. Overcome with panic, he suddenly dropped to his knees and clutched his chest as if his heart had nearly stopped. Meanwhile, the female intern walked up to Jasper and politely asked if he was the patient she would be responsible for during the next month. She introduced herself with a friendly smile, saying her name was Lucretia. Jasper happily introduced himself in return and gave her a wide, cheerful smile. At that moment, the director hurriedly interrupted their conversation. He firmly stated that Jasper was absolutely not the kind of patient that Lucretia should be assigned to. He quickly added that he would help her find another patient who would be much more suitable for her training. However, Lucretia's face suddenly turned slightly red, and she insisted that she was perfectly capable of taking care of this patient. At the same time, another intern stepped forward toward Levi and confidently declared that he would personally take responsibility for him during the internship. Levi calmly accepted the greeting and shook his hand, while the director watched the entire situation unfold with growing horror. Unable to tolerate it any longer, Sean rushed over and separated them immediately. He explained that Levi and Jasper were not ordinary patients and would not be participating in the internship. Their bodies were born with special warrior abilities, and the trainees would not be able to handle them. However, Louis responded with excitement instead of concern. He said that hearing this actually made him even more eager to meet them. Warriors born with innate bodies started at the second rank, making them extremely rare talents worth testing. He even imagined that with such an opponent, he might prove his abilities immediately after graduation. At first, he had been disappointed because the internship seemed too simple to impress the instructors, but now it felt like the perfect opportunity had appeared right in front of him. Louis explained that the exam rules prevented him from fighting ordinary people because they could be seriously injured. But if these patients attacked him, he wouldn't be harmed anyway, since his Golden Dome technique had already reached the powerful third rank. The other trainees looked at the bald young man with admiration. He was their leader, and they were proud that his Golden Dome technique had already advanced to the third rank. At first, Levi simply stared at him, unable to believe that this strange guy was seriously asking him to punch him. Louis confidently told Levi not to hold back. He insisted that a simple punch wouldn't be enough and encouraged him to use some kind of innate body technique. But Levi ignored the advice entirely. With one simple motion, he punched Louis straight in the chest, and the supposedly unbreakable Golden Dome shattered instantly. Meanwhile, Vincent was practicing his techniques not far from the training area. Just then, Cheryl hurried over to him and reported that the four-direction formation had finally been completed. She added that the squad leader would soon arrive to inspect their preparations. Vincent nodded calmly and confirmed that everything was ready and that the four-direction formation had been successfully established. The girl gently tugged at his clothes and admitted that she still felt upset about losing their planned 3-month vacation. Trying to cheer her up, Vincent smiled and told Cheryl that he had brought her favorite snack, a freshly boiled egg. When she looked closely, she noticed that something resembling her face had been drawn on the eggshell using a marker. Seeing that thoughtful detail made her smile brightly, and she thanked him warmly for caring about her feelings. The two of them then sat together in a quiet clearing so Cheryl could eat the egg. While eating, she asked Vincent whether he could sense the energy waves of everyone inside the hospital. Vincent calmly replied that he could monitor them through the formation. If any trainee attempted to harm a patient, the formation would react instantly and give them enough time to intervene. Cheryl laughed in relief and said that in that case there was nothing to worry about, since all the patients would remain completely safe during the internship. However, when they looked up toward the sky, they suddenly saw a figure flying rapidly straight toward them. They watched in shock as the person landed directly at their feet. Startled by the sudden appearance, Cheryl accidentally choked on the egg she had been eating. Vincent immediately grabbed her and began shaking her gently, trying to help dislodge the egg before it got stuck in her throat. A moment later, the piece of egg finally shot out of her mouth. Just then, Stephen and Frank ran toward them in alarm, thinking Vincent was attacking his own girlfriend. However, once Cheryl recovered and could speak again, Vincent quickly explained the entire situation, clearing up the misunderstanding. They soon walked over to the injured Louis, who was still lying on the ground. Struggling to sit up, he explained that Levi possessed a rare congenital body and that Levi had defeated him with a single blow. However, Vincent frowned slightly and said that he hadn't sensed any unusual energy fluctuations inside the building at all. After thinking for a moment, Stephen concluded that if Levi had managed to defeat a third-rank warrior without releasing any visible energy, then he must have relied purely on the raw physical strength of his innate body. Meanwhile, everyone gathered at the scene watched with a strange mix of excitement and fear as Louis's body had earlier flown through the air from Levi's punch. The director slowly approached Levi and explained that although their childish pranks had never harmed anyone before, he had always chosen to overlook them. But this time was different. Levi had actually struck someone, and that fact deeply disappointed the director. Levi lowered his head slightly, looking somewhat guilty, and quietly explained that the other guy had been the one who insisted that he should punch him. Even so, the director shook his head firmly and replied that Levi still had no right to swing his fists at someone, regardless of who asked for it. Nearby, the interns watched the entire scene with pale faces. At that moment, they suddenly realized that their strength might not even be enough to defeat a person who seemed like an ordinary patient. After exchanging nervous glances, several of them approached the director and admitted that they wished to withdraw from the trial because they clearly were not ready for this level yet. Just then, Frank arrived at the site carrying Louis on his back. The moment he saw Levi and Jasper standing there, his eyes widened in shock as he recognized them as the mysterious masters who had appeared during the battle with the 7th-ranked demon. Frank realized that his perception had been far clearer than that of his comrades. He had recognized those two powerful figures immediately, but now he wondered if the others would come to the same realization. As it turned out, the rest of the squad soon recognized them as well. The memories of that battlefield moment came rushing back to them all at once. They quickly rushed toward Levi and Jasper, thanking them sincerely and saying that because of their help, the number of casualties during the 7th-ranked demon incident had been greatly reduced. However, Frank couldn't help feeling puzzled. If these two were truly powerful masters, why were they wearing the loose hospital pajamas meant for psychiatric patients? Stephen suddenly suggested a theory. Perhaps, like certain legendary monks who hid among ordinary people, these masters had intentionally disguised themselves as mentally ill patients to remain unnoticed. Frank, however, quietly suspected something else, that maybe these two were simply eccentric individuals who happened to be incredibly strong. Stephen then reminded everyone that before they arrived at this hospital, several high-ranking officers had ordered them to treat Director Sean with the utmost respect. He guessed that perhaps the masters themselves had asked the director to help fake their mental illness so they could stay here quietly and cultivate without disturbance. The soldiers then began discussing the idea of recommending these two masters to join the special forces. After all, defeating a 7th-ranked demon was an extraordinary achievement. Louis listened to all of this with growing horror. When he realized that even the Sacred Duty Squad considered these two worthy of recommendation, he finally understood how foolish he had been earlier. The director suddenly realized that this situation might actually solve one of his biggest problems. He quickly agreed, saying that Levi and Jasper were indeed hidden masters and that such talents absolutely deserved to be recommended to the head of the Special Forces. Hearing this, the warriors respectfully bowed toward the director. Stephen then stepped forward and shook Sean's hand firmly. However, Levi and Jasper looked at each other in confusion. They couldn't quite understand what everyone was talking about. and they quickly decided that they didn't want to leave the hospital at all. At the same time, they were also worried that if they left, the director might end up worrying about them. Ironically, the director himself was even more worried about the consequences of them continuing to stay at the hospital. He stepped forward, gently placing one hand on each of their heads as he spoke calmly. He explained that although it would make him worry to see them leave, he also knew how much they loved cultivating. The special forces that everyone was talking about could give them better opportunities to grow stronger. Hearing those heartfelt words, both Jasper and Levi suddenly burst into tears. Without hesitation, they ran forward and hugged the director tightly. The surrounding soldiers watched this emotional moment quietly, realizing that it was truly a touching and sincere farewell scene. Louis sighed and said that despite being powerful masters, they were still just ordinary people with human emotions like everyone else. At that moment, Frank reminded him that since he had been injured, his exam had officially failed and he would have to return to the academy. Those words hit Louis like a hammer, and he immediately burst into tears. Meanwhile, Lucretia walked over to Jasper and said that during this internship he would be considered her assigned partner. She politely asked if she could observe and watch over him during the training. Jasper turned toward her with a cheerful expression and replied that he didn't mind at all. He then pulled several thin needles out from his hair and explained that in return, he would like to take care of her health by performing acupuncture. The director hurried forward, intending to stop the girl before things went too far, but Lucretia had already agreed enthusiastically. Without wasting time, Jasper immediately began the treatment. Lucretia believed that the acupuncture of such a mysterious master must be incredibly effective. Perhaps it would strengthen her inner energy and make her both stronger and more beautiful. Before long, her entire head was covered with dozens of carefully placed acupuncture needles. Everyone around them stared in shock. Just moments ago, Lucretia had looked perfectly healthy, but now she appeared to have fallen into a deep, motionless sleep. Even Jasper looked confused, unable to understand why she had suddenly passed out. Levi calmly reassured everyone that she would definitely wake up later. Cheryl checked on Lucretia and confirmed that she seemed physically fine, though she couldn't understand why she hadn't woken up yet. Stephen simply declared that this meant Lucretia had also failed her tests. The soldiers then decided that once the internship period ended in a month, they would return to the Special Forces headquarters together with these two mysterious masters. However, Levi and Jasper themselves seemed completely unconcerned about this news and didn't react much at all. At that same time, a demonic raven quietly flew into the territory of the psychiatric hospital. The creature soon discovered two individuals whose scent strangely resembled that of demons. After observing them carefully, the raven decided that the fourth-rank Fiercebear demon should be sent to test their strength first. But just then, the raven sensed something unexpected. Because he had been focusing so closely on those two individuals, he hadn't noticed the presence of powerful warriors nearby. Now he could clearly feel the aura of several 8th-rank warriors in the area. Fortunately, the raven possessed a special skill called concealment, which allowed him to hide the energy and aura of himself and nearby demons. Without that ability, the situation would have been extremely dangerous. Realizing this, he decided that the best plan would be to lure those two individuals away first. Only then could they properly investigate the situation. Meanwhile, Jasper and Levi were sitting on the ground casually playing with ants, while members of the warrior squad secretly observed them from a distance. Watching them carefully, Stephen concluded that perhaps through observing all living things, these masters were quietly contemplating the deeper truths of cultivation. The director later reported that all the trainees had been successfully assigned to their patients. The two injured trainees had already been sent to the hospital, and the 8th-rank warriors were monitoring Levi and Jasper closely. Even so, the director still felt uneasy because he had no idea what he should do if something unexpected suddenly happened. Soon the patients returned to their ward while the warriors continued observing them secretly. When they saw the two boys drinking milk while calling it cola and Sprite, they interpreted it as an advanced stage of cultivation practice. Stephen confidently explained that by using their consciousness, true masters could redefine and even reshape reality itself. Later they returned to the clearing again. Jasper prepared to continue practicing acupuncture, but Levi suddenly collapsed and fainted once more. Stephen spoke about how practitioners often helped one another grow stronger. However, as Jasper continued his acupuncture, Frank began to feel that something about the situation seemed very strange. Jasper then turned toward the warriors and said proudly that he had been practicing acupuncture for many years and would love to try his techniques on them as well. The warriors glanced at the sleeping Levi and then looked at each other before deciding that maybe it wouldn't hurt to give it a try. Frank, however, still had serious doubts and felt strongly that this was probably a terrible idea. Unfortunately for him, nobody paid attention to his concerns. The other members of the squad eagerly asked Jasper to treat them as well. Smiling brightly, Jasper pulled out his collection of needles and began preparing for the acupuncture procedure. At that very moment, Frank suddenly heard the faint, eerie sound of a clarinet echoing somewhere in the distance. In his mind, that haunting melody was something that usually played when someone was about to die. Not long after that chilling thought crossed his mind, Stephen, Vincent, and Cheryl all collapsed to the ground and fell asleep one after another, exactly the same way Levi had earlier. Jasper scratched his head in confusion, completely unable to figure out where his acupuncture technique had gone wrong this time. He then slowly turned his gaze toward Frank and told him calmly that he still had one more attempt left. Jasper beckoned him closer with a casual gesture. But in that moment, Frank felt as if he could clearly see the shadow of death standing silently right behind him. With a deep breath, Frank suddenly dropped to his knees. He declared solemnly that when he joined the Sacred Duty Squad, he already understood that his path would always walk the thin line between life and death. Even though he and the others were different, they all shared the same fate. If his comrades fell, he would fall as well. Then he raised his head toward the sky and shouted that he was ready for the procedure. However, the moment Jasper's needles touched him, Frank immediately slumped forward and fell asleep just like the others. At that exact moment, the demonic raven lurking nearby suddenly noticed something strange. The powerful aura of the 8th rank warriors had vanished entirely. Sensing the opportunity, the raven immediately called over the 4th rank demon Fierce Bear and the 5th rank demon Mad Tiger, ordering them to attack the remaining 2 humans while no 8th rank warriors were present. Meanwhile, the system notified Levi that he had successfully completed an SS rank upgrade. It also detected the presence of high-energy food nearby that could help suppress his hunger for several days. Elsewhere in the clearing, several patients suddenly noticed a massive bear and a large tiger slowly approaching them. At first, the patients assumed the animals must be harmless and friendly creatures. Unfortunately, that assumption would soon prove completely wrong. At the same time, Jasper noticed an unusually ugly black raven perched quietly on a tree branch above them. The raven was extremely irritated when he heard Jasper casually call him a strange-looking freak. Enraged, the raven immediately ordered the tiger and the bear to devour the humans without hesitation. Following the command, the 2 demons rushed toward Jasper, who still had absolutely no idea what was happening around him. Just then, Levi suddenly woke up. The powerful hunger that had been temporarily suppressed surged through his body again, instantly bringing him back to full awareness. The moment he opened his eyes, he saw a huge tiger lunging directly toward Jasper. Levi reacted instantly. With one swift punch, he struck the tiger and sent the massive beast flying away from his friend. The tiger's body slammed into the ground repeatedly before being launched far into the distance. Next came the bear's turn. Levi calmly grabbed the bear's paw and casually asked Jasper if he thought the creature looked cute. The demon bear was completely stunned when he heard these humans calling him cute. But his mood quickly turned sour when Jasper frowned and said he actually thought the bear looked evil and ugly. The bear's sadness quickly turned into anger, and he began wildly swinging his massive paws around. Levi calmly grabbed both of the bear's paws and asked Jasper again whether he still thought they were cute. Jasper carefully examined the large furry paws and admitted that they did indeed look rather adorable. Smiling warmly, Jasper reassured the bear that there was absolutely nothing wrong with its paws. Hearing those words made the demon bear unexpectedly happy. The bear suddenly remembered something from the past. When he had once volunteered to investigate humans, the Demon King warned him that humans thought baby bears were cute, but feared adult ones. The other demons had laughed at him, claiming that no human would ever find him cute. After studying humans for so long, they believed they understood exactly what humans liked. Despite the ridicule, the bear still carried out his mission. He disguised himself as a small bear cub and hid inside a box placed in the middle of a busy street. One rainy day, a young boy discovered the box. Seeing the tiny bear shivering in the rain, the boy decided to rescue it and protect it from getting wet. The boy secretly brought the bear cub home, but warned it to stay quiet. If his parents discovered it, they would probably send it away to the zoo. Later that evening, the parents returned home and called out to their son. Suddenly, the bear cub jumped out from hiding, its eyes glowing a terrifying red. Even though the boy tried desperately to stop it, the demon ignored him. Moments later, the boy heard a horrifying scream echo from behind the wall of his bedroom. His parents shouted that a demon had entered the house and called desperately for their son. But the terrified boy remained frozen in place. Finally gathering his courage, he grabbed a knife and stepped out of the room, determined to kill the bear that had murdered his parents. His first desperate strike pierced the demon's eye. Then the boy rushed forward again, gripping the knife tightly as he tried to finish the creature. But in the end, the boy failed to defeat the demon. Now, standing in the present moment, the bear was shocked because no one besides that boy had ever called him cute before. However, when the bear glanced downward, his expression instantly turned into one of pure horror. He realized that Levi and Jasper had casually torn both of his paws off. Other patients quickly rushed toward them. One excitedly announced that bear paws were considered a very high-quality cooking ingredient. The patient grabbed the severed paws from the boys and hurried into the kitchen, claiming he knew exactly how to turn them into a delicious dish. The demon bear screamed in fury and despair, realizing that these humans had tricked him and stolen his paws. He tried to rush forward to attack them, but Levi casually stopped him with a single punch. With one powerful motion, Levi launched the demon upward into the air, sending its body spinning. When the bear crashed back to the ground, it began crying again in humiliation. The raven flew down beside him and whispered that he should consider himself lucky to still be alive after facing such terrifying humans. Meanwhile, Levi and Jasper turned their attention toward the tiger demon, which had also been defeated during the fight. At that moment, the raven felt a terrible sense of dread. Something inside him warned that the tiger would never return alive. Without hesitation, the raven decided to retreat with the injured bear, abandoning the tiger to its fate in the clearing. Soon after, the patient chef returned excitedly, announcing that tiger meat was also an excellent ingredient and that he knew how to cook an amazing dish with it. Levi and Jasper looked at him in confusion, unable to understand what exactly he meant by tiger root. Levi then casually said that the tiger's entire body actually looked pretty cute too, so perhaps they should cook the whole thing. Together they grabbed the tiger's body by its paws and dragged it back toward the clinic. When they entered the kitchen carrying the massive tiger, the terrified cooks nearly jumped out of their skins. Meanwhile, the enthusiastic patient chef grabbed a knife and immediately began preparing the so-called tiger delicacy. Before long, the stewed bear paw dish was finished and proudly served to the other patients. Levi and Jasper also finished cooking the tiger meat and invited everyone around to taste it and judge their cooking skills. Meanwhile, the terrified cooks hurried to report the situation to the director. They complained that a patient had suddenly entered the kitchen and started chopping everything in sight, and now they feared for their lives and no longer wanted to work there. When the director and the cooks stepped into the canteen, the sight in front of them made their hearts drop. The entire place looked like chaos had exploded inside it. People were groaning, tables were a mess, and the smell of strange food still lingered in the air. The director froze for a moment, completely horrified by what he was seeing. Trying to figure out what had caused such a disaster, he walked straight toward Jasper. Staring at Jasper's strange appearance, he frowned deeply and asked in confusion why Jasper had bare paws strapped to his hands like that. Jasper awkwardly scratched his head and explained the whole story. He said that at first everyone had been happily gnawing on the tiger meat together, enjoying the meal without any problems. But somehow things had suddenly gotten out of control, and that strange situation was the result. The moment Sean understood what had happened, anger immediately rose in his chest. His face darkened, and he quickly concluded that the mysterious chef patient must be the one responsible for this ridiculous mess. Without wasting another second, Sean firmly decided to have the man taken away. The chef loudly protested, shouting that he was innocent and that Levi and Jasper were the real ones to blame for everything. But no matter how loudly he argued, nobody was willing to listen. The director then calmly asked an important question: where had the chef even gotten those ingredients? They were obviously rare and extremely expensive. The chef quickly replied that Levi and Jasper had hunted the animals themselves and brought them to him, and that he had simply cooked them. The director tried another method. With a serious tone, he said that if the chef honestly explained everything, he could arrange a proper kitchen job for him. However, the chef stubbornly replied that he had no interest in working anywhere that lacked high-quality ingredients. Hearing that response, the director lost his patience. He shouted loudly that almost every ingredient like the ones they had used was illegal, and cooking them freely like that was absolutely unacceptable. Soon the real problem became clear. The patient's stomachs were simply too weak to digest such powerful and unusual food. Realizing the danger, the director quickly ordered the medical staff to escort the victims to the clinic so they could receive treatment. After giving those instructions, he turned toward Levi and Jasper with a serious expression. He warned them that from now on they must never casually hand out such strange ingredients to other people again. At that moment, the director quietly sighed to himself. With the constant chaos caused by these people, he honestly began to wonder whether he would even live long enough to see old age. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a quiet clearing where the squad members were resting after undergoing acupuncture treatment. They were lying on the ground peacefully, and little by little they began to wake up, slowly regaining their awareness. Steven stretched his body and yawned before commenting that it made perfect sense they had slept so deeply. After all, Jasper had apparently put them into what he jokingly called a baby-level sleep. At that moment, Cheryl suddenly touched her face and noticed her skin had become unusually smooth and clear. At the same time, Vincent clenched his fists and realized a powerful surge of strength was flowing through his entire body. Frank then suddenly spoke up with excitement. He said everyone had been so distracted by their recovery that they had completely overlooked the most important change. Pointing toward the others, he explained with disbelief that every single one of them had actually advanced to rank 9. Frank then examined his own energy carefully and quickly realized that he had also broken through. Just like the others, he had successfully reached the 9th rank. The entire group was stunned. They simply could not believe that something as simple as acupuncture had helped them achieve such a massive breakthrough. In their minds, the masters who treated them now seemed almost like immortal gods. Excited by his newfound strength, Vincent decided to test it immediately. He gathered energy and prepared to unleash his powerful skill known as the bipolar lightning clap. When the energy formed around him, his teammates watched in amazement. The power released by a 9th-rank warrior created a formation that looked incredibly impressive. Vincent himself was thrilled by the result. With a big smile, he said that once they returned, he definitely wanted to thank the masters properly for helping them reach such a level. However, before anyone could celebrate further, a small flying drone suddenly approached them. In a mechanical voice, it announced that an emergency mission had been issued and they were required to return to headquarters immediately. The boys exchanged confused looks, unable to imagine what kind of crisis had appeared so suddenly. Still, duty came first, so they decided to thank the masters later and quickly set off toward their mission. As they traveled toward the Special Forces headquarters, they kept thinking about how unbelievable the situation was. None of them had ever imagined they would break through to the 9th rank in such an unexpected way. And all of it was thanks to those mysterious masters. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Tracy reported that about an hour earlier the monitoring center had detected powerful energy waves belonging to an 8th-rank demon. When the squad members arrived and heard this report, they were shocked. The appearance of such a powerful demon near the city was extremely serious. The one-eyed officer guessed that recently 7th-rank demons had already begun appearing around the city one after another. Now that an 8th-rank demon had also appeared, the situation was becoming far more dangerous. Tracy explained that when they connected every location where the 8th-rank demon had appeared on a map, a clear movement path appeared. The next predicted point was a nature reserve located outside the city. Based on that pattern, they suspected that the demon camp itself might actually be hidden somewhere in that area. However, there was also another possibility. The demon might deliberately be leaving obvious traces in order to lure humans into a trap. It could even be nothing more than a stage performance meant to confuse them. Because of that risk, Tracy emphasized that low-ranking warriors could not be sent on this mission. Hearing this explanation, Stephen finally realized the purpose of their emergency call. Their mission was to personally verify whether Tracy's theory was correct. Vincent immediately became excited. With confidence, he said they were the perfect team for the job because they had already broken through to the 9th rank. When Tracy heard those words, her eyes widened and her face twisted with pure shock. But every member of the squad confirmed Vincent's claim. They explained that the craftsman they had met earlier had helped them achieve the breakthrough. Even so, Tracy remained cautious. She said the situation was urgent and there was no time for a full evaluation, and she wasn't completely sure their story could be trusted. However, the one-eyed officer checked their energy and confirmed their internal waves were indeed above rank 8. They had truly reached rank 9. Hearing that confirmation, Tracy finally let out a breath of relief. This was actually good news, because their chances of surviving a trap or finding a demon camp had just increased dramatically. She then ordered that since the squad members were now rank 9 warriors, they should move out immediately with full force. Vincent confidently replied that whether it turned out to be a trap or not, they would complete the mission and return safely. The one-eyed officer silently thought that returning safely would only be possible if they didn't encounter 2 demons stronger than rank 9. Still, he pushed those worries aside. An 8th rank demon wouldn't normally reveal the true location of a camp, so it was probably a trap. Fortunately, with their current strength, they should be able to survive it. He also remembered that these 4 had just come from the psychiatry department talking about mysterious masters. That made him curious about who those masters really were. When he later learned the identities of those people, he was so shocked that his entire body trembled in disbelief. Soon the squad set off on their mission. When they arrived at the location, their detectors strangely showed nothing. They couldn't understand why they were unable to sense the energy of an 8th rank demon. At that moment, Frank sensed something unusual. He slowly reached out his hand into the air, and it felt like he had touched something invisible. Suddenly his face bumped into that invisible surface. A second later, Frank's eyes widened in horror as he realized what it was. They had just walked straight into a water barrier. Within moments, the entire squad found themselves surrounded by towering walls of water. The water barrier was a natural ability of 9th rank demons, capable of hiding all demon energy waves. At the same time, their detection system finally triggered alarms. It reported that several demons ranging from 6th to 9th rank were nearby and advised the squad to retreat immediately. Hearing that warning, the team instantly realized the truth. This location was indeed a hidden demon camp. Frank quickly grabbed his teammates' hands and urgently told them they needed to run right away before things became worse. But just as they were about to move, something suddenly crashed down from the sky with incredible force and pierced straight through the tablet Stephen was holding. Back at headquarters, the operators reported with concern that the signal from the sacred detector had been lost for quite some time, and all communication with the squad had completely disappeared. At that very moment, a terrifying figure appeared in the clearing, a 9th rank demon known as the Polar Kitsune. She smiled coldly, amused that these humans had actually managed to find their location. The squad members immediately understood the terrifying situation. They were facing a 9th rank demon with an innate ice body, an enemy far beyond what they could normally defeat. Stephen then added another terrifying realization. Since the water barrier came from a demon with an innate water body, that meant there was definitely more than one rank 9 demon present. The fox demon laughed softly and told them that although they had managed to find the demon nest, none of them would be leaving alive. Immediately afterward, she raised her hand and unleashed a deadly storm of sharp icicles that rained down toward the humans. Reacting instantly, Frank grabbed his prayer beads and activated his defensive technique, creating a glowing golden dome that protected the entire team. The shield proved incredibly strong. Every icicle that struck it shattered instantly, exploding into harmless fragments before they could reach anyone inside. Cheryl quickly reacted and activated the second form of her secret technique, the six-fold restoration pill. With steady hands and a determined expression, she directed the healing energy straight toward Frank, hoping the powerful medicine would help him endure the intense strain he was under. Just as the healing energy spread through the air, everyone suddenly noticed movement above them. Something had appeared high in the sky and was rushing toward their position at frightening speed. Within seconds, the figure became clear. It was a fifth-rank demon known as an iron-beaked woodpecker, a terrifying creature with metal-hard feathers and a massive, razor-sharp beak. The demon screeched loudly and immediately activated its iron beak skill. It dove straight down and slammed its hardened beak into the golden dome, striking with such force that a large crack instantly spread across the protective barrier. Seeing the opening appear, Vincent didn't hesitate for even a moment. He rushed toward the crack and unleashed his purple lightning technique, directing a powerful bolt of energy straight at the attacking woodpecker. The lightning skill carried tremendous power. The moment it struck, the demon's body convulsed violently before it dropped from the sky, completely unconscious, crashing heavily onto the ground below. But their brief relief didn't last long. When they looked up again, they realized the fallen woodpecker had not been alone. An entire flock of iron-beaked woodpeckers was now flying toward them in a dark swarm. The sky quickly filled with screeching demons. The flock began relentlessly striking the golden dome, their attacks combining with the fox demon's rain of deadly icicles. There were simply too many enemies. No matter how hard they tried, the team couldn't keep up with the overwhelming number of attacks hitting the dome. Frank clenched his teeth and struggled to maintain the barrier with every ounce of strength he had. Cheryl stood beside him, constantly supporting him with healing energy, but even together it still wasn't enough. Watching his condition worsen, Cheryl quickly realized something terrifying. Frank wouldn't be able to keep the dome standing much longer. In the next moment, her fears came true. She suddenly saw blood burst from Frank's mouth as the immense pressure began to destroy his body. Frank's legs finally gave out, and he dropped to his knees. The moment he collapsed, the glowing golden dome flickered violently before disappearing completely. As Frank weakly lifted his head, he saw one of the iron-beaked woodpeckers diving directly toward him, its deadly beak aimed straight for his forehead. But just before the demon could strike, a violent gust of wind suddenly erupted from behind it. The powerful current sliced through the air and tore apart several of the attacking birds. In the center of the clearing, a simple cane suddenly transformed into a sharp sword. The weapon shot forward with incredible speed, aiming directly at the fox demon, who barely managed to dodge the attack at the last second. The fox narrowed her eyes slightly as she landed on a branch. She quietly acknowledged that whoever controlled that weapon possessed considerable strength. The flying sword continued chasing her through the forest. She leaped gracefully between trees while thinking to herself that the power of ninth-rank humans was indeed impressive. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shook the entire clearing, sending dust, broken branches, and waves of energy in every direction. Stephen had gathered every bit of strength left in his body. With a roar, he unleashed one of his most powerful techniques, pouring all of his remaining energy into the attack. Vincent quickly joined him. Placing his hand against the ground, he summoned two enormous polar thunderbolts that surged upward with blinding power. However, while focusing on the spell, Vincent completely failed to notice something terrifying. At that very moment, the kitsune had silently appeared behind him. Seeing the perfect opportunity, she calmly formed an ice spear using her ability and hurled the deadly weapon straight toward Vincent's back. When Vincent finally turned around, his heart nearly stopped. A razor-sharp spear of ice was already flying straight toward him. In that final instant before impact, the last thing he saw was Cheryl suddenly stepping in front of him, turning her back toward the incoming attack. She had rushed forward without hesitation to protect him. The ice spear pierced directly through her body, passing completely through her chest. Blood immediately spilled from her mouth. Vincent watched in absolute horror as Cheryl's body weakened and began collapsing toward the ground. Acting on instinct, Vincent lunged forward and caught her before she could fall. He held her in his arms and quickly created a protective shield around them both. Looking down, he saw that Cheryl's entire body was soaked in blood. Yet despite the terrible wound, She softly told him that strangely, she didn't feel any pain. Using the six-fold recovery technique again, Cheryl directed the healing energy toward herself. At that moment, Stephen and Frank hurried over to them, both of them badly injured as well. Vincent spoke quickly, his voice tense. He warned them that the defensive formation protecting them wouldn't last much longer and ordered them to leave immediately. Stephen nodded and gathered the last of his strength. He activated a powerful skill called Bipolar Vortex, which opened a swirling portal in the air. With urgency in his voice, he shouted for his teammates to hurry and escape through the portal before the demons could stop them. At that moment, Cheryl cast another spell. She summoned every remaining heavenly pill she possessed and sent them flying toward Frank and Stephen. The two men were horrified when they realized what she had done. She had just given them the final heavenly pills that were helping keep her alive. Calmly, she explained that the formation needed to be sustained by her energy from the outside. Vincent quietly added that if he stepped into the portal, the formation would collapse immediately. Cheryl was already reaching her limit, and someone had to stay. He told them firmly that they had to survive and report everything that happened here to the department and the rest of the command. Frank shouted in panic as he realized what Vincent and Cheryl intended to do. But by then the portal had already begun pulling him and Stephen inside. Just before they disappeared completely, Vincent looked at them and calmly said that in the next life, they would surely become comrades again. Meanwhile, several powerful demons rushed out from the forest: the Reaper Mantis, the two-headed wolf, and the three-tailed leopard, all 7th and 8th rank monsters ready to smash the protective dome. Facing what seemed like their final moments, Vincent finally gathered the courage to confess his true feelings to Cheryl. He quietly told her that he had always liked her. He explained that when he first joined the sacred duty, he had been completely inexperienced. It was Cheryl who guided him, cared for him, and gave him the motivation to grow stronger. At that very moment, the dome was surrounded by another terrifying enemy, a 6th-ranked demon known as the Titanic Centipede. Cheryl smiled faintly and replied that she had always helped him because he was sincere and kind. She admitted she loved seeing him smile. Hearing those words, Vincent gently told her that he loved her smile just as much. He then admitted that the protective formation was about to collapse. With sadness in his voice, he suggested that they end their lives together before the demons could touch her. Cheryl nodded without hesitation. She said she was willing to do anything as long as she could stay beside the person she loved. Vincent then began preparing the final spell. He activated a forbidden technique that required his own blood as a sacrifice in order to carry out the final execution. But suddenly, an enormous explosion erupted exactly where the dome had stood, blasting the massive Titanic Centipede into pieces. Startled by the blast, the fox demon quickly leaped away from the area and watched the scene from a safe distance. She was genuinely surprised. These humans seemed completely unafraid of death. Meanwhile, far from the battlefield, Frank and Stephen successfully escaped through the portal and arrived in a safe location. Frank immediately jumped to his feet and insisted that they had to report everything to headquarters as soon as possible. However, before they could move, a sudden shadow dropped from above and launched an attack from the air. The stranger aimed a brutal kick straight at Stephen's head. At the last second, Frank reacted and summoned another golden dome to shield his partner. But the attacker's strength was terrifying. With only a single strike, the golden dome began cracking apart. The demon then rose into the air again and unleashed a massive blast of energy directly towards Stephen. The impact was devastating. Both men were thrown violently against a tree, and their wounds instantly began bleeding heavily. When they painfully lifted their heads, they saw a humanoid demon standing above them. Its appearance strangely human-like, yet clearly monstrous. The creature didn't speak any human language. It only let out a disturbing hiss. It was a terrifying national-rank demon, a cockroach. At first, the cockroach demon stared at the two men with a strange look of confusion, almost as if it were studying unfamiliar prey. Then, without warning, it lifted its leg and swung it downward with brutal force, clearly intending to crush Stephen's head in a single devastating strike. But before the kick could land, Frank suddenly sprang up from the ground despite his injuries. With a burst of determination, he rushed toward the cockroach once again and summoned his protective golden dome to block the incoming attack. While holding the barrier in place, Frank turned urgently towards Stephen and shouted for him to leave immediately. His voice was tense and desperate, knowing that staying here any longer would only lead to certain death. Stephen slowly stood up and leaned heavily on his cane for support. Breathing with difficulty, he said that the monster's aura was far more terrifying than the ninth-rank demons they had faced earlier. The pressure coming from that creature was overwhelming. Just standing in front of it made his body feel heavy and stiff, almost as if invisible chains were preventing him from moving. Still, Stephen quietly explained that if he hadn't recently broken through to the ninth rank, he wouldn't even have been capable of attempting the spell he was about to use. Hearing those words, Frank turned pale with horror. In that instant, he understood exactly what Stephen intended to do. Without hesitation, Frank raised his arm and charged forward, determined to buy his friend time. He knew very well that once Stephen completed that technique, there would be absolutely no turning back. Frank activated his skill known as Erat's Fierce Fist and launched a powerful punch straight toward the cockroach demon's face. He poured every last drop of strength into that strike, channeling his remaining energy into a single desperate attack. However, the demon barely reacted. It looked completely uninterested in Frank's attempt to harm it, as if the attack were nothing more than an annoyance. In the next moment, the cockroach casually kicked forward. Its leg slammed into Frank's stomach with terrifying power and sent him flying violently across the ground. Blood burst from Frank's mouth as he crashed to the side. Yet even as this happened, Stephen continued preparing his spell without stopping. Around him, powerful currents of wind began to swirl rapidly, circling his body like a growing storm. Stephen spoke quietly, explaining that he would use the wind itself as if it were a brush held in his hand. As he focused on the spell, memories suddenly surfaced in his mind. Long ago, he had once visited a quiet cemetery. Frank had been there with him that day, along with a small boy who stood silently beside the graves. The child had begun crying and admitted that he was always afraid whenever Stephen left for a mission. He confessed that he constantly worried that one day Stephen might never come back. The boy knew Stephen was a true warrior who protected ordinary people, just like his own parents had done. Even though he understood that duty, the fear of losing him still filled his heart. The child told him something Stephen would never forget. If a warrior ever chose to die, he should remember that someone was waiting for him and dreaming of seeing him return alive. The boy said that if Stephen disappeared, then his own world would disappear too. Back then, Stephen had knelt down and raised his index finger, creating a tiny whirlwind in front of the boy. Smiling gently, he said that he had been studying the mysterious writings of the Book of Heaven. At that moment, Stephen had quietly made a promise to the child, one he hoped he would never have to break. Returning to the present, Stephen continued his spell and declared that the earth itself would become like paper beneath his control. The cockroach demon realized that the situation was becoming dangerous and immediately rushed toward him. Its plan was simple: attack Stephen before the spell could be completed. But once again Frank threw himself into the fight. With the last bit of strength he had left, he charged forward and forced the demon away from Stephen. Gasping for breath, he said that if Stephen was determined to finish his technique, then in the next life he would gladly become his shield. Unfortunately, Frank's body had already reached its limit. The demon effortlessly blocked his attack and grabbed him by the head with one brutal hand. In the next moment, the cockroach clenched its grip and crushed Frank's skull, killing him instantly. Afterward, the monster casually tossed Frank's lifeless, blood-covered body aside like a piece of trash. But the swirling winds surrounding Stephen immediately pulled the corpse toward the center of the storm, and Frank's blood began mixing with the violent currents of air. The demon stepped back slightly and watched with curiosity. Around Stephen, a strange sphere made of blood and wind started spinning faster and faster. Stephen spoke calmly, saying that from this moment forward, his own blood would serve as the ink for his final technique. Suddenly, a thunderous blast erupted. The demon leaned slightly to the side, completely confident that such an attack could never harm it. Yet only a second later, it realized something unexpected. A deep scratch had appeared across its cheek. When the demon looked up again, it saw a horrifying sight. Where Stephen had once stood, only his skeleton remained upright. All flesh had been stripped away, yet the bones still stood firmly. The cockroach stared in stunned disbelief. At that moment, the fox demon flew up beside it. She calmly asked whether they should postpone their planned assault on the city. The cockroach replied in the harsh language of demons, giving its answer coldly. Hearing it, the fox simply bowed her head in obedience. Meanwhile, far away at headquarters, the one-eyed officer was studying the Special Forces employment contracts prepared for Levi and Jasper. He could not understand why Tracy had decided to arrange such agreements. Without them, those two men would never have obtained their current strength. Thinking about it carefully, he decided that no matter what happened, he was still the strongest warrior in the unit, and he couldn't allow things to develop this way. Just then, the office door burst open and Tracy rushed inside in a panic. She shouted desperately that the members of the Sacred Duty Squad had completely disappeared. The one-eyed man felt a chill run through his body when he heard the news. Not long afterward, he personally arrived at the battlefield where Steven's skeleton still remained standing. Overcome with grief, the one-eyed man slowly fell to his knees in front of the remains. Tracy explained that another search team had been sent earlier, but the one-eyed man angrily replied that if a group of 9th-rank warriors had already been destroyed here, sending another squad would only be sending them to die. He said he alone was stronger than 9th rank, so he would go himself. When he truly looked at the battlefield around him, his face twisted in horror at the devastation he saw. Turning slightly, he noticed another body lying nearby. When he recognized Frank's mutilated corpse, his entire body trembled with shock and grief. Unable to bear the sight, he covered his face with both hands and began to cry. After a moment, he carefully lifted Frank's body and prepared to take it away. Then he spoke quietly to Steven's skeleton, telling him he had done well and could finally rest. However, when he touched Steven's shoulder, he suddenly felt a flash of energy passing between his hand and the bones. Realizing it was powerful residual internal energy, he knelt down and placed his hand against the grass beneath him. Moments later, a massive glowing seal appeared across the ground. Powerful energy began surrounding the one-eyed man's body. As he watched closely, he understood that Steven had left behind a final message within the energy. The message revealed that their final destination had indeed been the demon camp. It was hidden behind an invisible barrier that concealed its energy. There was also a massive flock of 5th-rank iron-beaked woodpeckers capable of piercing armor, along with a 9th-rank ice-body demon and a powerful sensing demon. Steven's message also confirmed that one of those demons possessed national-level strength. Soon afterward, the glowing seal released chains of energy into the sky, spreading outward and forming a protective dome. The dome continued expanding until it eventually covered the entire city. The one-eyed warrior realized that the technique contained an incredibly powerful amount of internal energy left behind by Steven. It was a formation created by a warrior whose strength had surpassed the 9th rank. As the powerful structure spread through the air, Levi and Jasper also noticed strange glowing symbols drifting above their heads like pieces of floating writing. Soon one of the shining chains of energy stretched far beyond the city walls. It traveled across the distance and eventually reached a young blonde boy standing quietly somewhere outside the city. That boy was Silas, the grandson of Steven, the same child who had once waited for his grandfather to return from dangerous missions. Long ago, Steven had promised the boy something. If one day he failed to return from battle, he would use this special power to send him a final farewell. When Silas looked up toward the sky, glowing letters slowly formed in front of him, shaping themselves into a message left by his grandfather. As the boy began reading the message, his eyes quickly filled with tears that he could no longer hold back. In the letter, Steven explained gently that unfortunately, he had to leave Silas behind and asked him to take good care of himself from now on. He admitted that life without family would not be easy for the boy, but at the same time, Steven believed deeply in Silas's strength and knew that he could overcome the hardships ahead. Steven wrote that he never wanted to abandon him like this. Yet he also knew that great power always brings great responsibility. Every person in this world has duties they cannot avoid. Silas understood this truth better than anyone, perhaps even before Steven himself had fully realized it. At only 12 years old, Silas had already entered the Advanced Taoist Academy, and Steven had always felt incredibly proud of him. No matter which path the boy decided to follow in the future, Stephen sincerely hoped that he would always make choices he could be proud of. He encouraged Silas to listen to his heart, to find joy in living, and to enjoy the time he had in this world, because a person's life is short and should never be wasted on regret. In the final lines of the message, Stephen wrote that his greatest wish was for Silas to live honestly, happily, and with prosperity. His grandfather and parents loved him deeply and only wished the very best for his future. Meanwhile, far from the city, Raven and the wounded bear demon managed to escape from the battlefield and staggered toward a place that seemed somewhat safer. The injured bear continued sobbing loudly, complaining again and again that it had been tricked and betrayed. Dragging the massive creature along was exhausting for Raven. After a while, he began thinking that abandoning the bear might be the best option, since escaping alone would be much easier. However, just as he was thinking about leaving the bear behind, a hand suddenly appeared from behind him. Before he could react, someone grabbed the Raven demon tightly and squeezed its body inside a powerful grip. The attacker turned out to be a gorilla demon named Gargamel. Holding the Raven firmly, he began shaking him angrily while talking about something related to the chief's decisions. The Raven quickly claimed he had no idea what Gargamel was talking about. Then the Raven suddenly remembered something. One of the demons had once suggested to the chief that demons and humans might try living peacefully together. Raven had strongly opposed that idea. To him, the thought of peace with humans was ridiculous, like humans trying to negotiate peace with pigs they planned to slaughter. He admitted that he had reported this strange suggestion directly to the king. In his opinion, he had done nothing wrong because he was irritated that someone had dared to suggest such nonsense. When the king heard about the situation, she demanded that the demon who suggested the idea explain herself. But the king did not like the proposal at all. Without hesitation, he simply killed the demon who had dared to suggest peaceful coexistence. Now Gargamel had finally realized that Raven had been the one responsible for exposing that demon. That was why Gargamel had come, to take revenge. Raven tried desperately to explain himself and calm the gorilla down, but Gargamel showed no mercy. With brutal strength, he crushed the Raven and tore his body into 2 pieces. Afterward, he casually threw the broken corpse near a pile of trash and walked away without looking back. For a brief moment, memories of his past flashed through his mind, images of the time when his mother had still been alive. Meanwhile, the story shifted once again, this time returning to the psychiatric clinic. Late in the evening, Jasper suddenly realized that his wristwatch was missing. Levi looked at him with curiosity and asked where he might have lost it. But Jasper couldn't remember at all. Seeing his frustration, Levi kindly offered to help him search for it. The two of them started searching around the room, crawling on the floor and checking under the beds. Soon they realized the watch wasn't in the room at all. Jasper probably had dropped it somewhere outside in the yard. However, after searching the yard carefully, they still couldn't find anything. Levi then suggested they should check outside the clinic. The two boys soon walked along the quiet street outside the clinic. Even though Jasper doubted the watch could be there, they continued looking anyway. Just then, bright headlights suddenly appeared behind them on the road. Someone was driving toward them. As the vehicle got closer, they realized it was a large motorcycle, and the rider sitting on it looked enormous. At first, Jasper became frightened, thinking that some kind of ghost or monster was following them. But the motorcycle simply passed by them before suddenly coming to a stop nearby. When they looked closer, they saw that the rider was actually a green-haired gorilla demon. It was none other than Gargamel. At that moment, a system notification appeared in Levi's mind, informing him that it had detected a high-energy food source capable of eliminating hunger for an entire month. Meanwhile, the boys whispered to each other and somehow came to the strange conclusion that the gorilla riding a motorcycle actually looked kind of cute. Hearing their reaction, the gorilla became embarrassed. She couldn't believe humans truly thought she was cute, and she began wondering whether humans might not be as terrible as everyone claimed. Levi decided that it might be a good idea to communicate with the gorilla, so he slowly walked toward her. But suddenly the gorilla puckered her lips and blew a kiss toward the boys, which shocked them completely. In that moment, Levi and Jasper realized they had made a huge mistake when they called her cute. Without saying another word, the two boys quickly decided it was best to leave and hurried away as fast as they could. After they left, the gorilla lifted her head and noticed someone familiar approaching. The newcomer told her that the king had ordered her to return immediately to the demon camp. But the gorilla ignored the order and simply punched him in the face. The strike was so powerful that the praying mantis demon's head was instantly knocked clean off. Afterward, the gorilla calmly started her motorcycle and rode away. However, the mantis had not come alone. The rest of the demons had been hiding beneath the water barrier. When they saw their companion killed, they rushed out, determined to hunt down the traitor the king had been searching for. What they didn't realize was that the gorilla herself had secretly revealed their location to the humans. Some of the mantis demons chased after the escaping gorilla, while others rushed toward Levi and Jasper, who still had no idea they were being hunted. When the boys heard a strange rustling sound behind them, they turned around and suddenly saw a massive praying mantis standing directly in front of them. Surprisingly, they weren't even frightened. At that moment, the gorilla plucked a tuft of hair from her hand and tossed it onto the ground. This was her innate ability. It was an 8th-rank technique known as the astral body. The tuft of hair the gorilla had thrown onto the ground suddenly shimmered with energy. In an instant, it transformed into several identical clones of the gorilla, and without hesitation they charged straight toward the attacking praying mantises. At the same time, one of the enormous praying mantis demons loomed over the helpless patients, raising its scythe-like arms as it prepared to strike them down. Before it could attack, one of the gorilla clones leaped through the air with incredible speed. With a single powerful punch, it smashed the mantis's head clean off. At that moment, the system notified the protagonist that the demon's body was too damaged to be used as a proper delicacy. However, it could still serve as low-grade food if necessary. The gorilla seemed extremely satisfied with how the situation had turned out. Watching the defeated mantises scattered across the ground clearly pleased her. Then she glanced back at the boys and playfully winked at them again. The gesture horrified them once more. In the next second, the clones dissolved into the air, disappearing in small drifting clouds of smoke. Meanwhile, the real gorilla casually waved her hand toward the boys, giving them a cheerful goodbye as if they were old friends. As she drove away, she quietly thought to herself that maybe demons and humans really should try being friends instead of enemies. Watching her leave, the boys exchanged confused looks. They both agreed that this gorilla seemed extremely strange and probably had some serious problems with her head. Meanwhile, the one-eyed warrior returned to headquarters and immediately informed Tracy about the terrifying national-rank demon they had encountered. He handed her the message Steven had left behind and explained that because of the 9th-rank demon's innate ability called Water Curtain, they had been unable to determine how many enemies were present or how powerful they were. The Sacred Duty Squad had sacrificed their lives just to gather this information. It was difficult for the one-eyed man to admit, but he explained that after recent reassessments of demon intelligence and strength, a national-rank demon was far beyond his level. Compared to such a creature, he himself was simply not strong enough. Hearing this, Tracy suddenly realized something terrifying. That demon must have already sent its subordinates into the city earlier to secretly observe humans and gather information. She abruptly jumped up from her chair, her face pale with realization, and declared that the demon was likely preparing to launch a full assault on the city. Meanwhile, Levi and Jasper were still wandering through the city streets, continuing their search for the missing watch. While passing one of the apartment buildings, they suddenly remembered that the same woman who had once cooked that delicious snake soup for them lived there.